A much more complicated thing the government could do is create a whole environment that is conducive to the making and raising of children. This is different than just bribing or threatening people. What you're trying to do is looking at what the concerns of parents might be and seeing if you can address them proactively. In other words, make the whole environment, make it so incredibly easy to have children that people's natural inclination is to do so. For example, my concern as a parent might be, how can I pursue my career while raising my child? And for that, I need daycare. So that's the sort of thing that the government can do. It can either provide daycare or subsidize daycare. And by doing so, you make it much easier for me to want to be a parent. Another concern I might have as a parent is that all the incredible risks of it. There's so many things that can go wrong. You wouldn't engage in some sort of sport that had a 10% chance of fatality or a 10% chance of maiming yourself. You wouldn't engage in any sort of dangerous activity like this, but that's essentially what parenthood is. Procreation alone, just the act of birth, is incredibly risky. There are so many different kinds of birth defects. They just run the gamut. So many different congenital problems that can happen even before the child is born. And no matter how good the parental stock is, no matter how diligent these parents are, you're spinning a big roulette wheel, and you don't know if you're going to get some sort of genius, or you're going to get somebody who's damaged. And the role of government should be to be there to provide backup services, to provide a sort of insurance in case you do get a defective child, a child that needs a lot of services. Imagine having a child that's severely autistic. I mean, that's something that happens at birth, and it's not your fault, it's not anybody's fault, it's just the luck of the draw. And if the government and the society wants to have babies anyway, then the society has to provide an adequate safety net so that parents are willing to take this risk. Because the risk is really too great for any one individual to take. It's not too great for society at large to take such risks. And after birth, there's so many things that can go wrong. I want to know, before I even get into this, if my child gets into trouble, if my child has learning difficulties, if my child has disciplinary problems, commits a crime, I want to know that the services are there to deal with it. And that's the role the government should play. And that's the role the government does play in the Nordic countries, like in Norway, and to a lesser extent France and Germany. They provide lots of these services. There's a healthy safety net, and not all countries can afford that, unfortunately. In America, we go in the opposite direction. We provide nothing, very little services, and they're very weak services. We provide a rudimentary educational system, but we don't put a lot of resources into it. We provide some services in case your child has a developmental disorder, but not a lot of services. So being a parent in America is extremely risky. It's less risky in Sweden, where they have lots of services. And in fact, in Sweden, the fertility rate is about 1.9, which is pretty good. I mean, they're not quite at refresh rate, but they're pretty close to it. And maybe that's because of the Swedish system, all the services that Sweden provides. France has a fertility rate of 2.0, and maybe that's because of all the services that France provides. Unfortunately, Germany also has those services, and its fertility rate is in the gutter. So it's not the only thing that's required, but it's a prerequisite. If a government and a society expects its people, especially its best and brightest people, to procreate, then it has to provide some backup services. It has to provide a sort of insurance and support system for parents, so that it's easy to become a parent, that you know things aren't going to fall apart as soon as you make this decision. So what's wrong with this approach? Why can't it be applied universally? Well, the main issue is that it's very, very expensive to provide all these services. The Nordic countries have been able to do it, but they have an economy that is kind of geared to that, where the minimum wage is, $20, and taxes are very high. Norway, for example, has huge mineral wealth, which is supporting its social system. Not all countries can afford that. If you're in Poland or Romania, a country that, or Greece, where the economy is already bad, well, you just can't afford all these social services. So it's only a privileged few countries that can do this, and maybe they can't do it indefinitely because they're competing in the world market with all these other countries that have lower costs. And it's not clear that Sweden and Norway can keep this up indefinitely. In America, it's all about lowering taxes, nobody paying any taxes. Well, if nobody pays any taxes, then you don't have the money to support these social systems. So America is very poorly positioned for this sort of thing. So what it may come down to in most countries is that with an already shrinking workforce, and a rising number of retirees, all the society's resources are going to go to supporting the retirees, because retirees can vote, and if you were to say threaten their Social Security, they're going to vote you out of office. Children and unborn children cannot vote, so they have no political constituency arguing for their case. So if there's not enough money to go around, then you're going to put more money into Social Security and keeping the old people happy, and less money into education and all those services that parents need if they're going to procreate. So it's kind of a catch-22. You can't. Society is dying, but as society is dying, more of the resources are going to go to the old people, and less of the resources are going to go to the young people.